everyone, how's it going? Forrest here again with another installment of my complete analysis of all 389 Bach chorale harmonizations. We're looking at Ein feste Burg, ist unser Gott, which translates to a mighty fortress is our God. It's a pretty straightforward chorale, not much in terms of harmonic intrigue in comparison to the last chorales we've looked at. It's a very quaint chorale, and it was a delight to analyze because it was pretty straightforward. There was one moment that actually happens quite close to the beginning of the chorale, and I'll point that out when we get to it. But other than that, it was pretty straightforward to analyze. The harmony did what really the textbook would tell you it's supposed to do. So let's get started. So let's determine the key. We have two sharps in the key signature, and we start with a D major triad, and we end on a D major triad. So I think we are in the key of D major. We start on a D major triad like I just said, and then we have a passing seventh on the bass. We then proceed to B, F sharp, D, and D. Bach likes to spell his root position triads with 2/3 or 2/5. I feel like they might even be as common as spelling them in root position with a doubled root, which is what the textbook would tell you it's supposed to do. And then we have an interesting thing going on right here. This is probably the most interesting part of the chorale, as we have A, B, D, and D. I'm inclined to say that what's happening on this beat right here, if we didn't have so much movement in the other voices on the and of the same beat, I would be inclined to say that these were maybe accented non-chord tones in some of the voices, but because of the movement, I'm inclined to say that we have a 6-7 chord here, so this same 6 chord, but with A in the bass, so that would turn it into a 4-2 chord, as the 7th chord would be in third inversion. And then this D serves as a pedal, so it would be a non-chord tone over the moving voices, the three of the lower voices. In this context, we have G, C sharp, and E, and this D would be like a pedal almost, but that would make this a 7-6-4. I'm going to put that in parentheses as it's happening over a D, which is kind of an interesting sound, but this sort of suspension contrapuntal figure is interesting. But that's how I analyzed it. Maybe there's another way to go about analyzing it. Either way, there's really no way to work out it being a tertian triad or any type of tertian harmony other than that. We have F sharp, D, F sharp, and A. That is a D major triad in first inversion. We then have a C sharp diminished triad, E, E, G, and C sharp in first inversion, so that's a 7-6 chord. And then we have D, F sharp, A, and D. That is a root position triad. Again, we saw a motive like this in a chorale recently where he took a chord and alternated between it, inverting it each time. So 7-6-4, 1-6, 7-6-1. So he's just taking each chord and rotating it one time until he gets to root position. We then have E, F right here, which is a non-chord tone, G sharp, and B. Should have marked that as a passing tone as well. This is an E major triad, and in the key of D major, E major is 5 of 5. It's also a non-chord tone right there. It would be a passing seventh. And then we cadence on A. So in the key of D major, this would be considered a half cadence. A half cadence in the key of D major. Even though we get G sharp, it happens in proximity to the cadence. We talked about this last time, whether or not it sounds like a perfect authentic, or if it sounds like an authentic cadence, or if it sounds like a half cadence. That's up to you. To me, this sounded like a half cadence, as when I was trying to find the tonic, it still sounded like D. Another thing that sort of helps you is that imperfect authentic cadences are far less frequent than perfect authentic cadences. That being said, when you see an imperfect, or rather, when you see something other than the tonic of the dominant in the upper voice, that could be something that helps you, but in this case, the tonic is there, so this would be like a perfect half cadence, if there is such a thing, because that's what relates the two of them together. I don't know what I'm on about. All I'm saying is that half cadences can sometimes be easier to discern if you see a note other than the tonic in the upper voice, but that wasn't something we could rely on here. We then have B, D, B, F sharp, B, and D. That's another 6 chord in root position. Passing tone right there. And then we have an A sharp diminished triad in first inversion. That's a A sharp diminished over C. And that is 7, 6 of 6. And then we go back to 6 in first inversion. This is just a B minor triad over D. So D, B, D, and B. So no fifth here. But it's still 6, 6 with a passing tone here in the bass. And then we get F sharp, C sharp, A. That is an F sharp minor triad, and in the key of D major, that is a 3 chord in root position, and we have a passing 7th in the tenor. And then we have G, D, B with a voice crossing between the tenor and the alto, and B. Again, a root position triad. This is a G major triad, the passing 7th in the bass. This is a root position 4 chord. 3 often goes to 4 in Bach's progressions. 4 or 6. Remember, 6 and 4 are related to one another via being a third apart, a diatonic third. And then we have E, E, C sharp, and G. 4 wants to go to 7 via the falling fifths. And it's in first inversion, so it would be a 7-6 chord. And then on the next beat we get D, A, D, and F sharp. I think it might be worthwhile to mark that as 1, even though it's happening on an off beat. We then have A, D, and E. I think this D is an encore tone. We're really thinking about this C sharp and this G right here, which would make it a 5-7 chord. And then we get a perfect authentic cadence in D major. 5-7-1. Okay, very good. Something I want to bring up is the fact here. So a chorale we looked at a chorale not too long ago where we had a brief modulation from I believe it was G major to F major. Was it G major to F major? I don't remember the exact modulation, but it was a mid-phrase modulation, and I think there's an argument to be made here that we briefly visit the key of B minor as we get B minor, basically a 1 dominant 1 progression here, and then we get F sharp. However, because we don't get A sharp, I don't think it's... Oh, we actually do get an A sharp right here. We do get an A sharp. To me, this sounded more like a tonicization as we get a perfect authentic cadence in the same key quickly afterwards. So I think there is an argument to be made here that you can hear a modulation occurring here, but it's very brief, and it just didn't have the same aural effect to me, rather. I didn't hear a modulation here, even though the analysis might suggest otherwise. So let's go ahead and move on. We have another 1 chord here, D, F sharp, D, and A, with passing tones in the lower voices. We then have F sharp, A, C sharp, and A. We have 1 going to 3. They share 2 notes in common because they're a third apart, so it's kind of like 1 chord going to the next. And then we get some more, we get an interesting harmonic tidbit here that could constitute a modulation, but I really do hear this A major cadence right here as half cadence in the key of D major as opposed to a modulation to A major, despite how I analyze it. So we have E, G sharp, D, and B. That is 5-7 of 5, because an E major triad is the dominant of the dominant in the key of D major. And then we get C sharp, E, E, and A. That's an A major triad in first inversion, or a 5-6. And then the reason why I don't think we fully modulate here is what's happening on this beat. Even though these are all sort of passing tones or neighbor tones, they're non-chord tones basically if you lump them together, but really kind of what's happening here is just another 1 chord. It goes to D before going to E, E, B, and G sharp, which would be 5 of 5. And then we get a cadence on A, which is 5. So I do believe that there is an argument to be made here that there is a modulation to A. However, it really just depends on how you hear this cadence. This half cadence, of the two half cadence we've heard so far, this one feels more like an authentic cadence if you were to say one was an authentic cadence and one was a half cadence, but still they both sound like half cadences to me. So I don't think we've modulated, it's just we have a dominant, 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 followed by dominant. So I think there's just an extended tonicization here. I don't think it quite broke into the threshold. At least it doesn't sound that way to me, even though we get G sharps in further away from the actual cadence. I'd still say that it's still in the cadential zone. We're not getting it like at the beginning of the phrase. It doesn't sound like it starts off in A major or anything. And if it had gone on for longer, I think it might have had that potential to have modulated, but I really just think that tonicization is happening here. And remember, 5 of 5 is really just a substitute for 2, so this is just a lot of 2, 5, 2, 5, and then cadencing on 5. But that being said, I don't think we've modulated yet, because we immediately go from 5 to D major in first inversion. This is just a D major over F sharp with a passing tone in the alto. We then get E, D, F sharp, and A. I think this E is an accented non-chord tone, and really what's happening here is we are re-inverting the chord from 1-6 to 1-5-3, just turning the chord into a root position triad. And then we're moving to the second system. We go immediately to a G major triad with a passing 7th in the alto. That is a 4 chord in the key of D major. And then we have A, E, and C sharp. That is a 5 chord in root position. So we just have 4, 5, and then we get a perfect authentic cadence in the key of D major, just a root position 1 chord. 4, 5, 1. No frills. This is a short, perfect authentic cadence, as we've seen so far, there really has only been one cadence that's had a lot of counterpoint. And it's this one right here where we have the double syncopations, and the formatting here is kind of interesting, how there's a tie here, and it's just a byproduct of my software, but really we have syncopations in the inner voices, and the outer voices are sort of doing their own thing. We get a little bit of ornamentation here, but the rhythms are much tamer. Here the rhythms are basically, if there wasn't a fermata here, the chorale could have just continued. But yeah, we're here in the key of D major still, and then we immediately follow that D major triad with F sharp, A, F sharp, and C. That's just a 3 chord, again with 1 going to 3. This isn't the first time we've seen this in this chorale. And then we immediately get a B minor triad. That is a 6 chord in root position with a passing tone in the alto. And then we get C sharp, E, A, and C sharp. It's an A major triad over C sharp, so A major in first inversion. We then get D, F sharp, A, and B. D, F sharp, A, and B. That would be a 6 chord, a 6-7 chord in first inversion, so 6, 6, 5. And then we have E, E, G, and B. E, E, G, and B. That would be a 2 chord in root position in the key of D major. Again, because we have another half cadence here, and it goes to 5. Like so. Okay, and then we move to another E minor triad, E, E, G, and B. And here is actually where I think we get our modulation to B minor, actually, because if we look ahead, we get a cadence on, my apologies, we don't modulate to B minor, we modulate to E minor. That's my bad, because we have D sharps here as well, and this is a half cadence. We have another half cadence here, where we get a cadence on B major, which would be 5 of E minor. So this E minor that we get right here, I'm calling it a common chord, and it's just turning from the supertonic in the key of D major to the tonic in the key of E minor. So now we have G, D, G, and B. Again, 1 going to 3, but this time minor 1 going to major 3, as opposed to major 1 going to minor 3. And then we have a passing tone in the tenor. We then have F sharp, D sharp, and A. That is a D sharp diminished triad, so that would be 7, 6, because it's in first inversion, with passing tones in the alto and the bass. We then have D sharp, B, F sharp, B. That is a 5 chord, a B major over D sharp, so that would be a 5-6 with a passing 7th in the soprano. And then we have E, B, E, G. That would be our 1 chord. And then that goes immediately back to a 5 chord, a B major triad in root position. We have B, B, D sharp, and F sharp. We then get the same, we get B, B, F sharp, and D. We just get some voice exchange here where this third gets rotated, turned into a 6th between the upper voices. And then that would be just another 5 chord. And then we get F sharp, A, F sharp, C sharp. So in the key of E minor, you know what I'm going to say is I'm going to say that this 5 chord, actually, how are we going to go about analyzing this? We have F sharp, A, F sharp, and C sharp. In the key of E minor, that would be a byproduct of melodic minor, but maybe the modulation happens earlier. Now let's just go ahead and call this 2. If we call this 2 here, we can modulate back to the key of D major where it becomes 3, and that works out just fine because we're getting ready for our final cadence, which is a perfect authentic cadence in the key of D major, so the modulation has to happen at some point, and because the D natural gets introduced in the next measure, I think that that's our modulation point. So we have G, B, D, and B, again with 3 going to 4, right? So now that makes sense. And then we have G, C, E, C sharp even, E and B, and we kind of get this like passing kind of 7, 6, 4 going on right there, which I'll just put in parentheses as it's very brief, and this is just a byproduct of 4, those 2 notes in the 4 chord getting raised a step or a diatonic step each. It turns it into a 7 chord, which is where 4 wants to go via the rule of falling fifths. And then we have D, D, F sharp, and A. 7 wants to go to 1 for that reason. Passing tones in the alto and the bass. And then we get B, G, D, and B. It's another G major triad, but this time it's in first inversion with a passing 7th in the tenor and another passing tone in the soprano. We then get C sharp, E, E, and G. That is 7 in root position. Interestingly enough, we don't have an inverted 7th chord. Most of the time 7th chords are inverted, as we see like right here, right here, right here, right here. Pretty much all the 7th chords, or the 7 chords, not 7th chords, like chords that have, like tetrachords, chords that have a 7th on top of the triad, but 7 chords, like chords that are built on the leading tone. But yeah, root position 7 chord, it's interesting. One could make an argument that this is actually just a 5 chord as the E leaps down to an A here, but or 5-7, but we're going to call it 7. We'll call this a non-chord tone. And then we have D, F sharp, D, and A, just a 1 chord in root position. Passing tone in the tenor, very quick passing tone as it is 16th notes. And then we have G, B, D, and E. This would make this an E minor triad with a 7th, so an E minor 7th over G, so that would be first inversion, so that would be a 2-6-5. Then we get A, E, C sharp, and E with a passing 7th in the tenor. That's just a root position 5 chord, A major triad. And then we cadence on 1, D major, just a 1 chord. And that should be the chorale. Yeah, it's kind of interesting. Where exactly does the modulation happen? Is it a direct modulation when we go back to B from E minor here? I honestly don't know. I think that there's an argument to be made that it happens later, But I think with or even earlier, I think the inclusion of the D natural here on beat 4 is an indicator that the modulation has happened either here or before. So calling this 3 and then reanalyzing it as 4 is one option. But I think with the C sharp here, if we're still thinking in terms of E minor, the fact that we have, oh, you know what? I'm going to go back and reanalyze that because, this is B minor, right? That's really interesting. I'm going to go back and reanalyze that because this is not, this is D natural, not D sharp. Oh, I see. Okay, well, this is exciting. I missed that in my analysis. I just assumed that they were both a D sharp, so we were revoicing the chord. This is a B minor triad, so we're going to, I guess we're just going to call this a direct modulation. We're just going to say that we go to the key of D major here, and this is a 6 chord. And instead of, that makes a lot more sense. So we go from this B major triad, and then right after it, the quality changes. It just changes directly to a minor chord. So instead of trying to force a perspective on it, this I think is a direct modulation as you hear the triad voiced in two different qualities, one major and one minor, and that's what creates the modulation. So that's interesting. Yeah, I just attributed that sharp right there, and that changed the quality of it to me. I missed it in my analysis, the same way that I forgot to put the fermate in there. But that being said, for all intents and purposes, the chorale was pretty straightforward to analyze. There weren't too many tricks and turns. I guess there was one that I missed in my analysis earlier, but all the other chords were pretty straightforward to analyze, and the form was pretty straightforward too, just pretty much alternations of authentic cadences and perfect authentic cadences, except for these two consecutive half cadences here. But yeah, other than that, very pretty chorale, a very important chorale. This is one of Bach's most famous chorales from the cantata that shares the same name, which is what's the number for it? I think it's chorale number, or the opus number is BWV 80. I'm recording this before I'm editing it, of course, so you'll see the proper opus number from or the what is it, like the historical number, the BWV number. You'll see that at the beginning. So if I was right, I was right. If not, I'll make sure to put a note. But that being said, pretty quaint chorale, pretty straightforward to analyze. I'm looking forward to tomorrow's video. Take care, everyone, and thanks for watching.